Tonight, from Boston, in historic Faneuil Hall, a town hall meeting on the most important issues facing all Americans: guns, crime, and freedom. With your host, Susan Howard, and special guest, Wayne LaPierre.
Historic town meeting on issues that are foremost on the minds of many Americans today: guns, crime, and freedom, and how each of these affects our lives as well as the future of our children. In 1770, as a matter of fact, on the streets right outside of this very hall, unarmed citizens were shot down by British troops in what is now known as the Boston Massacre. In the trial that followed, the British readily admitted that the citizens' right to keep and bear arms was protected under English common law. Nevertheless, the British set out to disarm the citizens and totally silence dissent in the colonies. And so began the American Revolution. And it's on that note, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you the leader of tonight's discussion on guns, crime, and freedom, the Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association, Mr. Wayne LaPierre.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. First, I want to thank you all for coming here tonight. You know, when you look at what makes our country different from all the countries, other countries in the world, you're talking about those freedoms that were given to Americans in the Bill of Rights. Those are the threads that run from the present back to the past that make our country different from all the other countries in the world. Here we are tonight in historic Faneuil Hall in Boston, where not far from here, a little over 200 years ago, a group of citizen farmers went to a bridge and took on the mightiest army in the world, and they fired those shots heard around the world. But what people forget is every day in this country still, a group of Americans have to go to that bridge and stand there and defend freedom. It may be in a polling booth, it may be by getting out and walking a precinct, or it may be by coming here tonight. But every day, a group of Americans still have to get out there and still have to stand at that bridge and defend freedom.
What's your name?
My name is Victor Brown. I'm from Norwood, Massachusetts. Every time I see the NRA on TV, you're against something. What are you for?
You know what happens to me usually is when I tell the newspapers what I'm for, they never print it. They don't like a couple of words that the NRA is for. Building prisons just drives them crazy. I mean, stopping the plea bargaining really makes them crazy. Stopping the early release back to the streets. If you catch a felon with a gun, prosecute him. If someone is out there carrying guns and selling drugs, pick them up and take them off the street and enforce the laws on the books. They don't like to hear that. They laughed at the NRA last year when we said we were going to put 3 strikes on the book in Washington State. All the politicians laughed at us. And we went into Washington State and we said, we're going to do this, and we put it on the ballot. And suddenly, 73% of the voters in that state voted for 3 strikes and you're out. They laughed at us when we said we were going into Texas and support a $1 billion prison building initiative. The NRA was the only national organization in the state of Texas doing that. And yet it passed overwhelmingly. Suddenly, the laughing stopped on Election Day when the votes came in. And suddenly, after almost laughing us out of town last year, President Clinton decided, hey, maybe I shouldn't raise the age of youthful offenders up to 29 like he was trying to do in his crime bill. Maybe some prison money would make some sense. They had no money at all for prison money in that crime bill when they sent it to the Hill. And all of a sudden, President Clinton, after laughing at the NRA's get tough with criminals approach, decided maybe it made sense to make 3 strikes and you're out one of the centerpieces of the State of the Union address. I'm proud that the reason that happened was the NRA and citizens throughout the country whose solution to crime is as different as night and day from the politicians in Washington. I mean, the way we're operating in this country right now, if this were the old days and you had a lynching of a bad criminal, what you'd see is you'd see the gun strung up there with a rope, and you'd see the criminal walking off into the sunset. I mean, I've said it before, Billy the Kid would have been a youthful offender, and they would have purged his record and rubbed it clean when he was 18. And Jesse James, it wouldn't have been his fault. He would have had a bad upbringing, and that's why he turned out bad, so you can't...
Our town hall discussion tonight from Faneuil Hall here in Boston is on guns, crime, and freedom with Wayne LaPierre of the National Rifle Association. If you'd like more information on how you can save the Second Amendment from politicians who want to take your constitutional right away from you, please call this toll-free number, 800-385-4NRA. That's 800-385-4NRA. Again, if you'd like to add your name to a national petition urging Congress not to take away your right to own a gun for self-protection, please call 900-773-4114. An operator will take your name and your address, and the charge of $1.25 per minute will be added to your phone bill. That number again is 900-773-4114. And now, let's take some more questions. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Steve Webster. You know, you guys seem to want every American to own a gun, and it's almost a Wild West mentality. What's wrong with having the police protect us?
Ultimately, the citizens were given by our founding fathers the right to firearms ownership. I think in modern society, it's probably more relevant than ever. The fact is, we have a violent crime problem that's out of control, whether you're talking about Boston, whether you're talking about Los Angeles, whether you're talking about Washington, D.C. The criminal justice system is not taking these violent criminals off the street. And what we need to do is we need to protect the citizen's right to own a firearm to defend himself from these criminals. The fact is, at the scene of every crime, there's only going to be two people there, the criminal and the victim. Everyone else is going to come in later. The police, the prosecutors, the courts, they're not going to be there at the scene of the crime. And there's nothing more basic for that victim than giving him or her the right to make that choice of owning a firearm to defend themselves from a criminal the system will not control. Susan, I'd like to, if I can, I want to drive home to the American public, and it's something they already know, but it's censored all the time when I try to show it on television, what the real problem is. Let me just show you some of the articles from newspapers around the country talking about what the real problem is. Here's the Greenville, South Carolina paper. Killers released to the streets. Let me just read you the opening paragraph of this right here. The acts are as grisly as any ever committed in South Carolina. 5 of them were motorcycle gang members who forced 2 Aiken men and their girlfriends to sing along Christmas carols before tying them up and slitting their throats. Another was a drifter who walked into a Spartanburg paint store 2 days after Thanksgiving, pressed a .38 revolver against the head of a 60-year-old manager and fired. Another stabbed an 18-year-old Greenwood woman with a fork, a knife, and a broken bottle, and she died while screaming into the phone for her mother. These people that did these acts have all been released back to the streets by our criminal justice system after a very short amount of time. And it's all over America. Here we have another one. Parolee confesses to killing 4 women. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, not too long ago, and 2 police officers were shot and killed when I was there. When they caught the guy 2 days later, here's the headline. Suspect had 19 arrests and 9 convictions. He had just committed armed robbery against a Virginia woman and was given probation, and the most he'd ever served in jail was 6 months. All over America, this is what's happening. In New York City, Here it is again, 230,000 cases, zero justice. Let me just read you just one paragraph again. The criminal court's caseload reflects the problem. Of 230,000 cases handled, there were only 973 trials. Even plea negotiations were not much in evidence. Rather, there was plea auctioning, with prosecutors, judges, and defense attorneys disposing of hundreds of cases daily without investigation or implying tough sentencing guidelines. Nearly half the cases were dismissed. The rest, 120,000, resulted in guilty pleas, but significant penalties did not follow. That's what's happening all over America. That's why crime's out of control. Our juvenile justice system is even worse. I mean, in Chicago right now, you commit an average of 17 violent juvenile crimes. They leave you on the streets. We've just seen in Florida instances of up to 56. The child psychologists now studying our juvenile justice system are saying the system is actually encouraging the negative behavior among young people because they learn through reward and punishment, and the system never punishes. So they get the message that the system has given them a green light. This is a problem we all as Americans need to get together and fix. The NRA is a part of that solution. We just need to change the mindset down in Washington among the politicians.
Who's got a question? Over here. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Yes, Wayne, Mayo Benoit. If these gun control laws are enacted and they save only one life, wouldn't they be worth it?
It won't save a life. In fact, it may cost a life. It may cost hundreds and thousands of lives. I mean, we know for a fact 2 million times a year honest people use a gun to defend themselves. You're starting right there by taking that right away from them. We have 20,000 gun laws on the books already. There's no evidence they're working. I mean, I hear the AMA getting into this battle. I mean, the fact is, if a doctor wrote the same prescription 20,000 times and the patient kept dying, maybe eventually it would dawn on him to change the prescription. I mean, that's...
Right now we have a video that we'd like to show you, and we're going to ask Wayne if he would comment on it after it's over. This is footage that you may not have seen. It's on the LA riots.
Last year on April 29th, the riots began in the city of Los Angeles. For 4 days, the sky was blackened by smoke as the city was ravaged by arson, looting, and violence. America watched in horror as truck driver Reginald Denny was beaten and left for dead in the middle of a busy intersection in the late afternoon. In communities where citizens defended themselves, there were many instances of people protecting not only themselves and their own property, but also their neighbors as well. Jeff Haberman, the manager of this store in West Hollywood, tells how he and some co-workers stationed themselves on the roof and prevented a break-in across the street.
One of the guys down the parking lot yelled something at one of the guys like, "You don't want to do that." And the guy turned around and screamed something at us and left.
Many people soon realized having some kind of protection was imperative.
All the bad guys have guns. What do? And you have to have protection. And if the police aren't available during a massive riot or a big earthquake, you have to protect yourself.
Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I think what you just saw in Los Angeles was a theory of gun control up against the reality of crime and violence on the streets of America. And the interesting thing about that, to me, is where did the honest people run? They ran right back to that good old right given to them over 200 years ago, the right to own a firearm to protect themselves. And for all through Los Angeles, you saw honest people with guns defending themselves from criminals. In fact, if you think of all the major disasters, it's a common picture that you see everywhere. When the hurricanes hit Florida, there's the honest homeowner standing there with their firearm, defending their life and their family and their property. When a blackout occurs in New York City, you see the same thing again. That's the common picture you're beginning to see in disasters.
to answer this evening. But first, if you'd like more information on how you can save the Second Amendment from politicians who want to take your constitutional right away, please call 800-385-4NRA, toll free. That's 800-385-4NRA. And if you'd like to add your name to a national petition urging Congress not to take away your right to own a gun for self-protection, please call 900-773-4114. An operator will take down your name and your address, and a charge of $1.25 per minute will be added to your phone bill. This petition is very important. And that number again is 900-773-4114. And now, back to more questions. Who's got some questions? This person right here, I saw you raise your hand.
Mr. LaPierre, I know a lot of police chiefs are favoring ever more restrictive gun control, but police officers that I talk to don't want any part of it. They actually favor the presence of an armed citizen. Does a gun in the home, does an armed citizen help or hinder the job of the police?
We all know from the Wright-Rossi surveys by the Department of Justice that one thing criminals try to avoid are armed homeowners. In fact, I did a show recently with one of the gun control advocates, and when I made that point, the gun control advocate said, well, of course, it just makes sense to avoid an armed homeowner. And but the interesting thing is, all the government studies show gun control doesn't work, that one more law isn't going to stop criminals, that 2 to 6% of the American public has actually used a gun in self-defense against a criminal, and that we are right in terms of what we're saying about this issue. With the police, I mean, I'll tell you what frustrates me about the police. Every police officer I talk with, and I talk with a lot every day around America, I always say, what can we do for you? What can we do for you? I really want to hear it. And all the police officers say to me, Wayne, when we risk our lives to pick someone up, stop the system from immediately turning that person back on the street. That's what the police officers say.
Thanks. Look, before we take another question, we're going to listen to a short recording of a 911 call that was received by police. And we're going to ask Wayne if he'd comment on it after it's over with. Let's take a look. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, every time I hear that, as you hear it, it bothers me. I mean, the thing that bothers you listening to it, it's really what we're all about. It's what we're fighting to protect. You know, listening to that the police aren't going to get there in time. The woman was raped. You also know that if she had a firearm, she had every bit of opportunity to get it and be ready to defend herself. And to me, what this whole issue comes down to is no one, any politician, the government, lobby group, should be allowed to take away from that woman the right to make the choice as to whether she's going to own a firearm to defend herself or himself. That's what we're all about here.
Wayne, my name is Matt Salvestano. What can we do to have the courts administer stiffer sentences to these criminals who use the firearms in the commission of a crime and not take the guns away from the good, honest, decent people?
Good question.
This really starts back home, whether it's New Mexico or Boston or any other city in America. It starts with putting politicians in office that will attack criminals directly and take them off the street. That's what the people want. The people want a criminal justice system that works. And yet what the politicians all too often do in Washington is they use the crime issue to pursue a hidden agenda, which is really to take firearms away from all law-abiding citizens. And that's what the National Rifle Association has vowed we're never going to let happen. But we need to rebuild our criminal justice system. We need to start by funding prisons across the country. You have to have a place to put somebody. We need real offense sentencing. And what I mean by that is if somebody robs a 7-Eleven with a firearm, we need to make sure that they can't drop the charge of armed robbery and charge the person instead with something like simple theft and then give the person no jail time at all. It happens every day in our criminal justice system. The prosecutors call it swallowing the gun. The gun charge disappears, and the person walks without any jail time.
Thanks, Wayne. Who else? Yes, sir. What's your name?
Ray Fournier from Henniker, New Hampshire. Mr. LaPierre, first of all, I'd like to thank you, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here with you, sir.
Well, same here. Thanks so much
no
for all
sweat.
of you.
My question...
We keep telling them in Washington there's a real America out there if they'll only go outside the Beltway, but they...
Yes, sir. My question
yeah, they don't
is,
dare to.
When did I become the bad guy? I go to work every day. I love my family. I pay my taxes. I play by the rules. Yet the media and the politicians always look at me. I'm an NRA member. I'm the bad guy. Why?
When... Yeah. You're the good guy. The only time you became the bad guy, so-called, is when politicians lost their courage about confronting criminals directly and taking them off the streets and wanted to pass some cosmetic nonsense that was pretend make-believe crime control that would take away your firearm and yet not touch the criminal. What we keep trying to tell all these politicians is that laws don't affect criminals. If they did, there wouldn't be crime in the first place. Only honest people abide by the laws. The criminals could care less. It's common sense. You know it. I know it. Everyone in this room knows it. But somehow the politicians in Washington haven't gotten it through their heads. They believe if they pass one more regulatory law that somehow, poof, crime's going to stop. Well, the criminals are laughing all the way to their next crime. And the honest people around the country are the victims. And we need to change the system. I mean, we need to change a lot of lawmakers down there. We need to put politicians in office that will do what the people want and have a clear understanding of who the good guys are and who the bad guys are and what needs to be done.
Right.
Samuel Picaro. I've seen something called an Eddie Eagle program in school. I was wondering if that was part of the NRA.
It sure is. In fact, is it Samuel? One of the things that really galls me about what's going on in America right now is here the NRA is spending millions to teach Samuel and other youth in the country firearm safety through our Eddie the Eagle program, which teaches firearm safety to young people. And to people kids too young to be around guns, it teaches them to avoid firearms altogether until they get older. And yet NBC, ABC, and CBS, every night when you turn on your television show, are making millions in profit by showing and teaching Samuel and the other young people in America gratuitous violence and irresponsible use of firearms night after night after night.
What's your name?
My name's Karen Naughtonson.
Karen, what's your question?
Okay. About media bias, I think there's something that the media does not tell, and I think it would be worthwhile for politicians to know. I am not an NRA member, but I am a gun owner. And for every 5 NRA members, there are 95 gun owners who are not NRA members. And I, for one, am tired of daddy knows best and mommy knows best government. And it's important that I'm here tonight.
Yes, it is.
Because with what's been happening, I've been motivated to political action. I'm writing, I'm voting, and I think that the present administration has wakened a sleeping giant. There are between 60 and 80 million gun owners, and I think that for every gun owner, there's probably one more pro-gun vote in the family. That, folks, is a majority, and that might help explain some of the puzzling pro-gun election wins throughout the country. We're coming to the polls in force.
Of the National Rifle Association on Guns, Crime, and Freedom from Boston's historic Faneuil Hall. We hope that a lot of your questions have been answered tonight. And if you'd like to read more about it, Wayne has written a book called Guns, Crime, and Freedom. It's now available in your local bookstore. We'd really like to thank you for joining us and thank our audience. I think you need to give yourself a hand.
A home video of the full 1-hour version of this town hall meeting on guns, crime, and freedom is available. For further information on how you can obtain a copy of this home video, call toll-free 1-800-385-4672. To add your name to the national petition urging Congress to preserve your right to own a firearm for self-protection, please call 1-900-773-4114. An operator will take down your name and address, and a charge of $1.25 per minute will appear on your next telephone bill. Remember, that number is 1-900-773-4114. To survive in America today demands that you understand the most important issues facing us all: guns, crime, and freedom. This compelling new book objectively demonstrates why responsible Americans do have the right to keep and bear arms, and why that right does not increase America's crime rate. Authored by the National Rifle Association's Chief Executive Officer, Wayne LaPierre, Guns, Crime, and Freedom addresses every point at issue, from the original intent of the Second Amendment to its modern implications, from personal protection to real solutions for reducing crime. Guns, Crime, and Freedom is an indispensable guide for all Americans struggling to protect their constitutional rights. Guns, Crime, and Freedom is now available at a bookstore near you.